NCM team based in Bellingen. I'm mainly responsible for the IT, an increasing amount of mapping and operational support. I have a science degree in geology and geophysics, so I've sort of got some background in mapping and things like that. The information and the maps that you can see up the back are basically just on the principle of filling the glass with water for a flood. There is complex software and stuff where you can simulate stormwater runoff, but one of the things is every flood's different, and the maps that you see at the back, and I'll talk you through, are purely just water level coming up from the river. No local stormwater or block drains or anything like that. This is an image from the Urunga flood in 2009. Part of the issue with the flooding in central Urunga was block drains, as well as the sheer amount of local rain. And as much as council can keep drains clean, things like storms and floods generally block drains by themselves very quickly. So this is one of the things about not knowing how a particular flood event is going to play out. The information I've used for the floods mostly comes from government sources. So I've used elevation data coming from the spatial data services that the government buys. They have fairly good accuracy, 30 centimetres vertically and about half a metre horizontally. Some of the information has come out of the lower Bellinger and Clang flood plan risk that the Bellinger Shire Council commissioned, and the base maps that I've used are from Google satellite images. The software I've used is open source geographic information stuff called QGIS. It's a fairly user-friendly GIS system and a couple of plugins. Over the last couple of years, there's been some major changes in terminology that things like the flood report and the Bureau of Meteorology have started to use. And I just thought I'd touch on them quickly. So you'll hear about PMP, which is the probable maximum precipitation, or the maximum amount of rain a local area will get. So what the PMP for Urunga will be different to, say, Dorrigo, will be different to Armidale, and different to Forbes and Parks and places like that. So the possible maximum precipitation is one of the major calculating factors in the PMF, which is the probable maximum flood height. So it's extreme, the probability of a PMF, a probable maximum flood, is very unlikely, exceeding the 1 in 1,000 years. But in saying that, it's the next slide is about the increasing risk. This is if you go on to the ABC News website, this article came up yesterday, saying new research has just been released, and it's basically saying by the end of the century, so 2100, the possible maximum precipitation levels will need to increase anywhere from 13 to 33%. So that means we're likely to get increasing amount of rain, and the risk of more rainfall in an event is going up. So now we get into some of the maps that I've put together. So all these maps that you'll see, or parts of, are up on the windows at the back. This, there are 2 maps in this series, and they're just point data which I've chosen a whole lot of different points. This one's around Newry Island and Yellow Rock, but they basically go from the Raleigh floodplains round Norco and round Yellow Rock, right down over Urunga and Ballingen Keys. So there are quite a lot of points. So what you'll see is in this column in the table between the two maps is the point data. It corresponds to the numbers on the map and the points. The columns going across are the elevations. So this is the elevation above mean sea level. So 44, so this point here on Urunga Island has an elevation of 2.71 metres. In the 2009 flood, which was 3.4 metres, there would have been 74 centimetres of water approximately. Now this will vary. The locals may know it was either above that or below that, but this is just working on the principle of filling the glass with water. This is saying, you know, as we bring the river level up to 2.35 metres, this is where the depth that will be at these points. The next column across is the depth at a 5.5 metre flood. Now, from the information I could find, that the 2009 flood was one of the record floods in Urunga at 3.45 metres. Why I've chosen the 5.5 is because that's that flood record being broken by 2 metres, which is what happened in Lismore. Its flood record was broken by 2 metres. So I wanted to give an indication of how deep the water would be in these locations if we had a similar event here that broke the record by 2 metres. The very right-hand column is basically the depth at the current possible maximum flood. So, which in the Urunga area is currently at 8.75 metres. So if we go back down to that 44 point, that would mean there was 6 metres of water over the road at that particular point. So it's, as I said, the likelihood of this possible maximum flood occurring is very low. But as we go right, we've already had that one. If we had caught the same sort of event that Lismore had, you know, there's a potential for a 5.5 metre flood. Again, this map is to the right of the previous ones up there. And this map is basically showing low points. And the red ones are points, and certainly this isn't all the low points. This is just a small set of examples. So you can see this point at the start of Yellow Rock Road following Back Creek. It's below 2 metres in elevation, as is the point on the track going in beside the caravan park, Urunga Island, around Atherton Drive. The yellow points are between 2 metres and 2.5 metres. And then the orange points are above, between 2.5 and 3.5 metres. One of the important things about this is, as you can see, we can't predict how high a flood is going to get. So we've seen from Lismore, we've seen out at Parks and Forbes in the last week that, you know, rain events, you know, can be predicted as being a severe storm, but we can't tell how much rain is going to fall in that event. The problem with these points, like approaching the bridge from being on the Urunga Island, is that once you get over 2.5 metres, that becomes a cut-off point. You get isolated there, and then you get isolated along the swamp here, which is at a very similar height, just slightly above. So once it gets to about 2.5 metres, or once you get up to the 2009 flood, you can't get off the island and you can't access the higher ground in the back of Newry Island because you've been flooded out in the swamp area here and right at the bridge, and the road will be the old highway. So one of the things about this map is trying to bring local awareness, be aware of your local situation. These are the what are called inundation maps, and they've been created just using a very simple calculation. I've taken the elevation data and I've taken the flood heights. In this case, I've used the 2009 flood plus 2 metres, which is the 5.5 metre flood. This particular area is Bellingen Keys, and it shows where the water would be covering in a 5.5 metre flood. There are various inundation maps for Bellingen Keys, for Yellow Rock, for Newry Island, Central Urunga, west of the highway, west of the railway, sorry, and Raleigh, and a small one, A31 for the start of South Arm Road, which has another sort of cut-off point. Okay, so the very white areas that's obviously the river channel. The heavier white is deeper, so you can see that the pond is getting increasingly white, and the slight blue tinge around the edges means there will be a little bit of water there. Also on these maps I've put the contour lines. So these ones along the river are is the 2 metre elevation line, and then as you come in there's a number of 4 metre ones, and it's about 4 metres where the access road into Bellingen Keys comes down off the old highway, Gilmore Way. But there are, again, from the low point maps, there are cut-off points at different areas as the water level rises that people will have to start driving through water, or they will be isolated and not able to get out if the river continues to rise. So this is one of the photos that the museum has donated from the 2009 flood. This is certainly on the way down. One of the really hard things with photos is to know whether they're at the peak of the flood, on the way down, on the way up. But we know that the flood peaked in the middle of the night, so this is either on the way up or on the way down, so it's not as high as it did get. So this is just an aerial view of Osprey Drive, so I was asked to talk about it. There is, the issue along Osprey Drive is more, with the 2 reservoirs and lakes there, is more one of a stormwater runoff. The road will get cut if the runoff, there's enough precipitation that it exceeds the capacity of the drains and culverts at the bases that go under the road. So it's likely that it would go under in a really big rain event, but it's likely not to remain isolated for very long. Things we can do. Understand the risk at your location. On the Bellingen Shire Council website, they have an online mapping portal. So if you go to the main homepage and scroll down, there's a link towards the bottom half of the page, which is to the online mapping. When you click on that, you go to another screen that has a whole lot of buttons, but the one you're looking for is this flood plan risk management button, which I've taken a copy of the button to put on. When you follow that, click on that button, you come to this page. There is a disclaimer just to acknowledge the information and its source and how it's to be interpreted. Once you click that, you're left with this screen. And up the top here, you have the capability of putting in your address. So when you put that in, it will zoom into basically the lot your house is on, and it will tell you what the flood likelihood or rate, give you more flood information for your current locality. This continues of things you can do. Know where the low points are, and where you get cut off, and what height a flood has to be. As I gave an example of Newry Island and a couple on Bellinger Keys. If you're new to the area, talk to locals, talk to the SES, use the council portal. As Kerry said, the SES and NCN and other services have really great brochures about what to do, how to prepare. As I said, talk to people who have been through past floods. Remember, every flood is different, so the next flood that's equivalent to the 2009 will probably present in a different way. And other areas will be flooded, possibly not central Urunga, but other areas there might be blockages or excess stormwater flow. Access information from the council and the emergency services. As Kerry said, I could just as easily do a similar sort of mapping exercise with fires. And the RFS and Fire and Rescue can talk about that. Know where you will go if you are evacuated. This is part of being prepared. Be organised. Do you have friends or family on higher ground that are going to be high and dry during any flood? Do you know where the evacuation centres are? Be prepared. Have a flood and fire plan. Do it now, while there isn't an imminent threat. It's too late to put a plan together when the flood's starting to happen or when there's a fire approaching. The Red Cross, the SES, Fire and Rescue and RFS all have really good kits for preparing that. Have a bag, with batteries and a list of things like your medication and stuff that you need to grab quickly to put in that bag before you leave. And it's really, really important to take personal responsibility in those situations. If you're given an evacuation order, act on it. They either aren't the emergency services, the personnel to come back and tell you again to evacuate. There aren't resources to go in. Groups like the SES, unless they've got the latest state-of-the-art trucks, which of course haven't been rolled out here, they're not allowed to drive through floodwater. So it's about getting out while you can and being prepared. Acting on the evacuation order can and will save your life. Not acting on it will put other people at risk. We saw in Lismore local boat owners having to go out. yes, we might be lucky the next time, you might be given an evacuation order, have to evacuate, the flood level might not come up and through your premises. The one after that might be a totally different story. It might go to the 2009 level, it might go above that. And then, like in Lismore, you know, there were people trapped in their roof cavities and on their roofs, and it's quite remarkable that there wasn't a greater loss of life up there in that situation. Quite remarkable, the museum just opposite the caravan park to have that much water lapping through it and through the door. As Kerry and Annette already said, one of the things that can help is registering with the Neighbourhoods Care Network. One of the things that is starting to happen with the Bush Telegraph is the SES is contacting us. We can isolate a very small area, say Uri Island or Yellow Rock or Osprey Drive, and send out a very specific SMS to that area to alert to a severe weather or a fire or possible other conditions. So thank you, that's the end of my presentation. I'll hand you back to Kerry. I'll certainly be available at the end for questions and any explanation or discussion on the maps and more detail on how they've been made.